Hello again. Do you ever sit down to paint, but you can't figure out what you want to paint? In today's project, I'm going to show you how I jumpstart that process by just painting colors that I like all over my paper and then figuring out what I'm going to make out of it. We're starting out with the groundwork of color already all over the paper, and I've already made a couple of videos that show that process, so if you want to watch that part, you can check those out. I'll put links to them here on the screen somewhere and down in the description. Today's video is part 3 of my Lost in Negative Space series, and we're going to get to that negative painting part nearer to the end of the project, like we did in part 2. In fact, this video could be considered part B of part 2, because we're going to start out with a very similar process and then we're going to add a couple of steps to it, and we're going to really bump things up a level or 2 or 3. I think you're going to love it. What you need to know before we start is that I just randomly put color all over my paper, just sort of playing and creating interesting color combinations. I didn't have any particular idea or plan in mind. At that point I hadn't even decided to paint birds. I did not try to force the paint in any direction. I just let the wet paint lay there on the wet watercolor paper and kind of mix and blend all on its own. I didn't mix it with or blend it with my paintbrush or anything, just let it blend all on its own and create watercolor magic for me. Then once it's dry, then I start looking in it for shapes to appear, and sometimes things just jump right out at me, and other times I have to look a little bit deeper to see stuff in there that I want to create a painting of. But it's really easy. It's like looking for shapes in the clouds. I think mostly we all probably did that as kids, and it can be really fun and easy. And where I might see birds, you might see birthday cakes or race cars. So we're basically letting our painting tell us what it wants to be, and that's our starting point. So I'm working this project with my mixed media paper sketchbook, and I pulled out a stack of my reference photos of birds, and I picked a few that I thought would work well with how my watercolor paint clouds came out. I'm going to start with this yellow warbler, and I'm going to start to pick out those shapes and define them a little better with my pencil, but I'm going to be careful not to draw in too many details here, because all of those pencil lines will need to be drawn over with either oil pastels or black pens or markers or something. So I'm going to try to put in only the basic shapes of the body, like the head, the wing, etc., so that I don't, I don't want to overdraw in here. Now, let's see, I do need to put these little bit of details right in here. I really just want to put in just enough that's going to help me be able to follow the shape as I'm finishing it later with more watercolor. Now this right here, I'm going to put in, I don't know where I put my reference photo for this. It is called, the one I have in mind to go here, it's called a green-headed tanager. And I'll find that reference photo and get that in the frame here in a bit, so you can see what that looks like. But I just think that that is the perfect shape to go right in here. And I'm going to turn this little purple blob. It sort of looks like a heart, but I'm letting it be a wing and a breast of this green-headed tanager, since I'm drawing birds. And I think I'm going to make him look like he's perched on a little twig here. And this one really looks like a cardinal to me. I just see a cardinal right there. Oh, before I get to that, I want to put a little of this oil pastel on here so I can get a feel for how it's going to go. Because this is really, remember, I'm just kind of making this up as I go here. But I wanted to see how it's going to look when I outline everything later on. So there's a little bit in there just to kind of help me see what that is. That also helps me decide how much detail to put in or not. Now, I'm putting this cardinal in here. This just looks exactly like a cardinal to me, the way the color came out on the page here. So that's exactly what I'm going to make it. And in fact, this section of color right in here is what helped me decide to paint birds here, because I just really see a beautiful cardinal sitting right there. Now I'm going to put a little bit more of this oil pastel on here so I can get the placement of the cardinal right on this branch. And I need to make a little bit of adjustments to the shape of the body. And it's okay to use my eraser a little bit, but I try not to use it too much because it does change the texture of the paper, and it will erase some of the paint that I have on there too. Now I got to think about this for a minute to decide how I want this to go. I'm just going to keep making adjustments till I got it like I like it, and I'm actually going to use my eraser and take a little bit of this oil pastel back off of there too, because I want the feet to be wrapped around that twig there, and I don't want that oil pastel line going through the feet, so I'll just take it back off with my eraser. I'm using dark brown on the oil pastel because I like the way it looks, but it's not too strong like a black would be. The black crayon would just be too strong and too in your face, so I'm using a dark brown. And I'm just going to go ahead and put some more of it on right here. Get these twigs in so I can really see where I'm going to have the twigs and branches that this little group of birds is sitting here on. I'll finish out the line of this branch going right out that direction behind this little bird. And here I'm finishing up the last bits of it. You can see how I'm just really just getting the outline on there. And that's all. I don't want to put too much of these dark lines on there. That'll allow me to get creative with the paint and everything, get some more details in there. And these are my oil pastels. This set is pretty old, but they still work, so I still use them. Now I'm going to add some more watercolor paint and incorporate some more color in here, paint in a few leaves, and just kind of bump up the color. And I want some strong value golds and reds in there, and just some more details and a lot of color, because when I get to the negative painting part, what I'm going to do there is put a really pale or pastel opaque background in, and so I want to keep all the rest of it here, the birds and the little group of leaves and branches that they're sitting in. I want to keep that really bold and bright with color, so it'll contrast with the pastel, the opaque pastel background that I'm going to put in. So I'm just going to put leaves in until I'm happy with how many I've got in there. And again, I'm just playing. I'm making this up as I go. I didn't really have a reference photo for this part of it, and my reference photo did not have these three birds all together in one picture. I'm just grouping them in here because my original playing with the paint on the paper gave me these shapes, and so I'm turning those shapes into these birds. I find it makes a really fun jumping off point, and it's kind of a way to spark my imagination or my creativity to just put paint on the paper like that and then decide what it should be. It's fun. I hope you try it sometime. Anyway, I'm just putting these leaves in here all over the place, and I'm going to keep adding color and stuff, like I said, until I am happy with it and like it. Now I'm going to put this outline on here. I'm using a slightly lighter color oil pastel here for the leaves. They're kind of like less of the focus. So I've got the darker color, the stronger color on the birds themselves and the branches or the twigs, but the leaves I'm just going to use this just a slight little bit lighter color for the outline on those, and I'll add a few more up here because I don't know, thought it looked like it would help kind of have them be surrounded or encircled by these leaves. Feels like that would be good, so that's what I'm doing. And this is just an experiment and a playtime, playing with paint, so I can do whatever I want to do, and if it doesn't turn out, that's okay. I was just playing. But most of the time it turns out pretty nice. I like to dab this little bit of strong color in here because I think it kind of makes it look, you know, when the leaves have all this different color on it, it sort of enhances the idea or the illusion that there's dappled light coming through the leaves and branches, and so you've got the gold color hitting some spots, and then the red and the purpley on some other spots. They're much more in shadow, and I'm not really paying a lot of attention to where my light source would be on those leaves parts because they're turned every different direction, and so since I'm playing, I'm not making that hard on myself. I'm just kind of playing and throwing that in there, and it usually works out pretty good because of I don't know, it just works. Try it sometime, you'll see what I'm talking about. I guess maybe on the individual leaves, I sort of pay attention to where the light and shadow would be, and maybe that's why it works. Because I do it individually instead of as a whole, and it ends up working. But also, I'm not trying to go for photorealism here, not at all. This is representational, but it's still full of whimsy, and it's meant to just be pretty and be a nice piece of art. It's not supposed to be, you know, photorealistic and accurate like that. And I think I'm getting there with it. Now, I think I'm happy with the leaves, and I'm going to strengthen the colors on this cardinal here. I'm going to, I like that my original colors there had yellow, kind of like almost a yellow breast and a real yellow head. I'm going to use those almost like an underpainting and incorporate a little bit more of the yellow in here to give like a golden glow into these feathers. And I think that's going to be really pretty. So I'm just putting it in here and letting the colors run together and blend. But I am using a lot of yellow because I like the way it just makes it glow. And I don't think it makes it look like the bird is not red, that he's yellow. I think we just have a glow happening there. That's what I'm going for anyway. And again, I'm just playing, so I can do this and do these experiments and see if it works and see how things turn out. That's what I started out to do today, and that's why I'm using my sketchbook with mixed media paper. I didn't get a big piece of my best watercolor paper out and tape it to a board and make a big plan. That's not this project. This project is, let me just whip out the sketchbook and just throw some color on my paper and see what happens. And this is what's happening, and so far I like it. I think it's looking really good. I think it looks like the sun is shining right down on that cardinal and making him glow. So now here is my green-headed tanager photo, and so I'm going to turn this picture back, this bird back here into this green-headed tanager. When I first saw these pictures of these birds like this start to turn up in my feed online, I thought that's a fake thing. That's been photoshopped. I since found out these are real birds. There's the most beautiful and colorful birds you can ever imagine are real out there. And if you don't believe me, go in an exotic bird shop sometime. You will be really inspired to paint beautiful birds after taking a trip in one of those places. But this is just a photo I found online, and so I'm just incorporating a bird like this into my painting. And I don't remember right now. If I remember to do it, I will get a link to where I found these photos. I use Pixabay and what's that other one? Unsplash.com. I use them for reference materials a lot because they're legal for artists to use those photos. So I'll try to remember to put those links down in the description so you can find these bird pictures if you want to. But here I'm just throwing some color onto the background that I had there, and that purple color that was already there works like an underpainting. And I used Cobalt Turquoise for the breast and that little part on the head, and then I used Aureolin yellow for the back of the neck and for the bottom of the bird there. And when I put it over the top of that bit of purple, the purple kind of shows through because the watercolor is transparent, and so you get a really neat effect going on there. And again, I'm just playing, so I put it on there to see what it does, and after it dries, I'll look at it and see what else I might want to do to it to get the right look that I want to have. And this is a mixed media piece, so I may put some oil pastel on there or something like that. I don't know, we'll see. And I'm also using some really dark purple and mixing some really dark mixture of it so that I can get these dark colors on there instead of using black out of a tube or something, because I don't like the way that looks. But I liked how this purple came out and what it did for making a nice dark color there. I think I mixed some indigo in with some Winsor violet. Now I'm going to move over and work on my yellow warbler again. And this warbler, I'm not going to do that much to him because I love how fresh he looks, just like he is, and I don't want to spoil that. He looks like a honeydew melon or some cantaloupe or something. It's very fresh and pretty. And I'm going to just use a little bit of that Aureolin yellow for the tail because it has a pretty good amount of opacity, or it can be applied in a less transparent way, so I can go over the purple there and get me the effect that I'm looking for in these tail and wing feathers, and I can actually get a little bit of like feather-like detail to happen there. Even though I'm painting, in a sense, I'm painting light over dark, which you don't usually do in watercolor. But for this, it's working, and if I can say it one more time, I'm just playing with my paint, so I'm trying it and seeing what happens, and I think it looks good. So I just touch in a little bit more as I need and make that look beautiful. And I've probably got a lot more on there than, I mean, it looks really bright right now, but it is going to dry a little different than that. So now I want to move all this stuff out of the way and switch gears and talk about something a little different at this point. I have a lot of options for doing this background. I can use white or black watercolor or gouache, or I could use acrylic paint, thinned down with water and tinted with some color. But my favorite is Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. I'm going to tint it with some watercolor to get some pastel versions of the colors I've used in the rest of the painting. And I've just got a little, I'm using the back of my paint palette here to mix on, and I'm going to mix some of that color that's going to go back up in there. I'm going to pick up some of this orangey pinky stuff that I had and touch some of that into the bleed proof white puddle here. Now I've added a bit of water because I want it to be kind of thin, and I'm just going to keep adding color until I get a color that I like. I don't want to leave that in my paint palette. That's where I touched it with the bleed proof white. So I'm going to want to get that off there. I've got it on my hand now. Alright, let's trade these two things. Let's see if I've got this in the frame good. Not quite yet. There's a couple more things around. So I'm going to paint this. This is the sort of negative painting because I'm painting the background, and I'm going to just layer or glaze this mixture of opaque paint and watercolor right into the background here around these birds. And I kind of got an idea in my mind of where I want the pinky orange color to go. So I'm going to put this in there. And I got to get all these little spaces down in between the birds and the branches and stuff, and make sure I cover all the background areas with this opaque paint mixture. And this pastel background is going to make my my subject stand out. And because it's opaque, it's covering up whatever color I have in the background there. But that's okay, that's what I want it to do right now. Opaque, by the way, means you can't see through it as well. It, like transparent, you can see through it. Opaque, it's muddy or milky, or I don't know. You just can't see through it. Not as well. It's not a really formal definition, but gets you the idea. So now I got a little more white here, and I put some blue in it. I'm making a very pastel light blue color. I think I'll add a little bit more of the bleed proof white and lighten it up a little bit. And then I'm going to just put that right in here. I've sort of got the idea in my head that there's like maybe a stream or water running through somewhere below these birds, and then there's the sun low in the sky. I think maybe it's sunset rather than like sunrise. And it's not gonna, this doesn't look like this is where the water is exactly. It's just to kind of get it in there in a more whimsical, less realistic kind of a way. So I'm just putting blue water running through here like it's indicating or putting you in mind that there's a bit of a stream or something in the background behind these birds or under them or something. And I'm making just straight lines between the colors. You know, the separation, it goes immediately to one color, from one color to the next, not a blend at all with this pastel background. I'm actually going to put a line there later, like my outlining. Now I've added a bit of yellow to my blue puddle and turned it into green, and this is going to go behind these leaves over here. And it's just kind of another indication of, okay, there's a bunch of leaves. So we have the pink of the sky and the blue of the water and the green of the shrubs or the tree or whatever that the birds are hanging out in. And it's just a pastel background behind my subject here. And again, it's going to make my subject really stand out and come forward, because this is pastel and opaque, and the leaves and the birds, they're bright, bold colors. So that's the difference there. And the negative painting aspect is just in the fact that I'm painting all the spaces between the leaves and the birds and the branches. So I'm not painting an actual shape of something that you could recognize like a leaf shape. I'm just painting the spaces between all the leaves. And it's the background, but that's what negative painting is. So now I got to get all of this out of my paint palette. There's my bleed proof white. Now I want to get the opaque paint all out of my paint palette, and I want to get it out of that part in there where my watercolor paint was. I don't want to leave that in there, because that will mess up the transparent factor of my watercolor paint. So I'm taking all of this other parts out too, where I put the bleed proof white over into my paint palette. I can't leave that in there. If I forget to take it out later, it'll cause a problem. It'll end up in everything, and my nice watercolor paint will not be transparent. It'll be cloudy and milky, and so I'm getting that out right away. Now let's go back to the oil pastels and put in some more color and details in a few places. I'm going to add some color onto some leaves, and if I want to put sharper lines, I just peel the paper back a little bit from the edge of the oil pastel or crayon and get to one of the expose a little bit more of one of the edges, and I can get thinner lines and be more detailed. And I'm going to just put some color right here. Well, you can see I put some on that bird. Now I want to figure out which color I want to use, so I've just got a little piece of scrap paper, and I test them out and see what I want to use. And again, I peeled some paper back, and now I can make a thinner line. And I'm going to put some more detail in the breast area and wings of this green-headed tanager. And then I can throw some more color on some of these leaves just to make them pretty. I like how that looks. And that kind of mirrors the colors in the bird too, so that's a good thing to do. And I'm just playing with color and throwing some in here and there wherever I think it looks good. And if I am not sure what to do, I can pull my scrap paper over and test out a color. I can pull my reference photos over and look at them and see what details I might want to put in. And I can smooth some of the color where I add oil pastel. I can smooth that a little with my fingertip, or I could use one of my paper blending stumps if I want, and just keep adding more color until I get it like I like it. And I really like what that yellow is doing, so I'm just going to add some more with the oil pastel. Bump that right up. Do a little more blending. Blending and smoothing. And blending those colors together, making a nice, easy transition. And look how much that bird just really glows. I like what that yellow does there. And a little bit of dark blue added to some of these leaves. Again, I'm just using some of the colors that I used in the rest of the painting. Now I'm going to take a pencil here, and I got to figure out which one I want to use, again with my scratch paper. But I'm going to outline the different color sections of that background that I put in there, because I just like that style for this particular piece of art. And that's just about, I think, the last thing I want to do. It's looking pretty good. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please click like, and if you're not already a subscriber, subscribe to my channel. That helps me out a whole lot, and it'll help you get notifications each time I put a new video out. Thank you very much. I hope to see you again next time.